The chandeliers sparkled like drops of frozen sunlight, each crystal refracting warmth across the vast wedding hall. The air pulsed with the hum of violins, the chatter of aristocrats, and the hollow laughter of those drunk on wealth and champagne. Dresses swept the marble floor like waves of color. Men in tailored suits raised glasses heavy with pride. Everything gleamed with perfection. Everything, except for her. In the farthest corner, nearly swallowed by shadows, stood Elena. Her uniform was pressed neatly, the white apron tied carefully, but her hands betrayed her. They trembled as she balanced a silver tray of champagne flutes. Her eyes stayed low, never meeting the glittering gaze of the guests, as though she already knew what would come if she dared to look too high. Elena had worked in houses like this for years. A ghost in silk mansions, a shadow in golden rooms. The wealthy spoke around her, over her, but never to her, unless it was to bark orders or remind her of her place. Tonight was no different, yet somehow, tonight cut deeper. Perhaps it was because the family celebrating was not just any family. Their name was one written into her past. As she stepped forward, her shoes soft against the polished marble, she heard them. Whispered words, cruel and deliberate, slicing sharper than glass. Look at her, carrying drinks like she belongs here. She should be grateful we even allow her in the room. Pathetic, isn't it? A maid surrounded by diamonds. The laughter was light, casual, as if her humanity were nothing more than the punchline to their jokes. Elena's throat tightened, but she pressed on, tray balanced carefully. Her silence was armor. But armor cracks. Near the edge of the dance floor, a guest stretched out his polished shoe, deliberately angled in her path. Elena didn't see it until too late. Her foot caught. The world slowed. The tray tilted, crystal stems glinting under the chandeliers like falling stars. Then came the sound, sharp, merciless, the shatter of glass against marble. Shards scattered across the floor, champagne spreading in golden rivers. The room erupted, not with gasps of sympathy, but with laughter. Cruel, echoing, thunderous laughter. Elena fell to her knees instantly, heart-pounding, cheeks burning with shame hotter than any flame. Her fingers reached desperately for the broken pieces, slicing skin as she gathered them in trembling hands. She didn't care about the cuts. Pain in her body was easier to bear than the humiliation pressing down on her chest. And then, the bride appeared. Her gown shimmered like 1,000 sequins of ice, her face painted in delicate strokes of vanity. But her voice, sharp, cutting, was anything but delicate. Unbelievable. She hissed. "You've ruined my perfect moment. Get her out of here, now." The command struck like a whip. Heads turned, eyes narrowing on Elena, as if she were a stain on the marble floor itself. Elena froze, her breath shallow, shards still cutting into her palms. She wanted to speak, to beg for a chance to clean it, to apologize, though she had done nothing wrong. But her throat closed, sealed by years of swallowing words that never mattered. Her chest ached with the weight of memories. Memories she never dared to reveal. Not here, not now. Because this family, this celebration, had ties to the very past she had spent years trying to bury. The laughter quieted into a cruel silence. 2 men in black suits began to step forward, ready to obey the bride's order. Elena lowered her head, bracing for the humiliation to deepen, bracing for the push out of the glittering room into the cold of the night. But then, a voice, strong, commanding. "Stop!" It cut through the hall like a blade through silk. Every head turned. The music faltered. Even the bride's sneer froze on her lips. The word had come from the far side of the room, where the groom's father stood. A man whose very presence carried weight, his authority carved into every line of his face. His eyes, dark and unyielding, fixed on Elena, not with disgust, but with something far more dangerous. Recognition. The silence was deafening. Guests shifted uneasily, unsure why the patriarch of the family would intervene for a servant. Elena lifted her eyes for the first time that night, meeting his gaze. And in that moment, a tremor of something unspoken passed between them, something no one else in the hall could understand. But what came next would leave the entire wedding in shock. If you believe that no one deserves to be humiliated for simply doing their job, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Because kindness has the power to change lives. The hall remained frozen, all eyes on the groom's father as he stepped forward. His expression was grave, his voice low, but laced with undeniable authority. He raised a hand, silencing the whispers before they could spread, and then he spoke words that sent chills down every spine in the room. "She stays." "Do not touch her." The bride's eyes widened, outrage flickering across her perfect smile. The groom shifted uncomfortably, confused by his father's sudden defiance. The guests, once so bold in their mockery, now stood in tense silence, their curiosity gnawing at them. Why would the head of this powerful family defend a maid? Why was his gaze lingering on her with such gravity? And most importantly, who was Elena, really? The hall held its breath, waiting for answers. The truth, long buried in shadows, was about to come to light. The hall was frozen. The chandeliers still burned with golden fire, but their light seemed colder now, their glow no longer joyous, but heavy with tension. Guests who moments before laughed freely now stood stiff, their voices trapped in their throats. The music had died, and in its place lingered the echo of a single word. Stop. All eyes turned to the source. The groom's father, a man of stature, with shoulders weighted by both age and authority. He stepped forward slowly, each stride deliberate, his gaze never leaving the maid still kneeling among shards of broken crystal. His voice cut through the silence, deep and unwavering. She stays. Do not touch her. The words carried more weight than an order. They carried something else, an emotion few had ever heard in his tone. Respect. Confusion spread like wildfire. Guests exchanged bewildered looks, unsure why the patriarch of the family would defend a servant. Even the bride faltered, her carefully painted smile trembling at the edges, her fury barely hidden behind a mask of disbelief. But then his voice rose again, and what he revealed would silence even the most arrogant heart in that glittering hall. You mock her, he said slowly, his eyes scanning the crowd, because you think she is beneath you. But what none of you know is that this woman once saved my life. A gasp rippled through the guests. The words struck like thunder in a room already charged with storm. Heads turned back to Elena, their sneers replaced by curiosity, confusion, and something darker. Shame. Elena's hands trembled as she pressed them against her apron, blood from the cuts on her palms staining the fabric. She wanted to speak, to protest, to deny attention that burned on her like fire. But his voice continued, steady and grave, and no one dared interrupt. Years ago, he began, his eyes distant now, as if the past itself replayed before him. I was a man broken. My world had collapsed. Loss had taken everything from me. It was during those years I met her father, a man of rare loyalty and courage. He was not rich, not powerful, but he was a friend truer than any I had ever known. The hall was silent except for the sound of his voice. The bride's jaw tightened, her fury simmering, but even she could not stop him. Guests leaned in unconsciously, hungry for the secret unraveling before them. But tragedy struck, he continued, his throat tightening, though he forced the words through. Her father died in an accident that should never have happened, a life stolen too soon. And in his last breath, he entrusted me with his most precious treasure, his little girl. The crowd froze. Whispers filled the silence like a tide. Elena lifted her eyes, tears blurring her vision as she realized the truth was finally out. The father of the groom, the man who stood before the most powerful family in the city, was speaking not to defend her work but to defend her bloodline. Elena, he said, his voice breaking ever so slightly, is no servant. She is the daughter of my dearest friend, a child I failed to protect as I should have, a child the world was cruel to when it should have shown her compassion. The bride's hand twitched, her nails digging into her bouquet as the room shifted. The cruel guests, who once mocked Elena, now lowered their eyes, shame prickling their skin like needles. The arrogance that filled the air only minutes ago was replaced with guilt, the kind that made it hard to stand tall in your own shoes. And then, with a slow, deliberate step, the groom's father approached Elena. He bent down, not as a master, lifting a servant, but as a man honoring a soul long overlooked. His hand reached for hers, ignoring the blood and the broken glass. Stand, he said softly. You do not kneel here? Not tonight. Not ever again. The room seemed to breathe for the first time in minutes. Elena's chest rose and fell in uneven breaths, her eyes filling with tears she had held back for years. When he pulled her gently to her feet, the hall was silent, but this time it was not the silence of cruelty. It was the silence of awe. What happened next would shock even those who thought they knew every secret of this family. The groom, standing near the altar, stepped forward. His face was pale, his voice uncertain. Father, why didn't you tell us? The older man's eyes flickered toward his son. Because it was not my story to tell. It was hers. And tonight, it is time you all see her as she truly is. The bride's smile crumbled, fury and embarrassment flashing across her face as guests began to whisper, not about Elena now, but about her cruelty, her arrogance. For the first time, the bride was no longer the center of the wedding. Tears slid down Elena's cheeks as she stood, not as a maid, but as the daughter of a man who had once been family. For so long she had been invisible, humiliated, discarded like the very glass she picked from the floor. But tonight, in front of those who mocked her, she was lifted into the light of truth, and in that light, kindness prevailed over cruelty. Respect silenced arrogance. A forgotten child was given back her dignity. The music resumed, but it was no longer shallow or vain. The celebration shifted, transformed, not about luxury or vanity, but about compassion, loyalty, and the memory of a friendship that still lived on through her as Elena stood tall. Her eyes glistened with tears. She finally felt what she had long been denied. She was seen. She was valued. She was home, but the question lingered like a shadow in the room. Now that her truth was revealed, how would this family, especially the bride, face her tomorrow? If you were at that wedding, how would you have treated Elena? Share your thoughts in the comments, because the way we treat others defines who we truly are. And so, this story reminds us of a truth we often forget. The way we treat others, especially those most overlooked, reveals who we truly are. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Show your support by hitting the like button, sharing this video with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribing so you never miss the next powerful story of kindness and truth revealed. And now, I want to hear from you. If you had been at that wedding, how would you have treated Elena? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes the smallest words of kindness can spark the biggest change.